entrepreneur, I look at it like anything I can do to flatten the learning curve and kind of share what I've learned along the way. I'm always happy to do that. So I will start my story with, I am a UConn alumni. I graduated in 1997 with my bachelor's in political science and communications, and then in 99 with my master's in research methods. And then about 10 years ago, I got certified in organizational psychology. So market research is the backbone of everything I do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how that comes into play. And as mentioned, I've co-founded Cloud9 Online. We create medical grade meditation apps. So I'm really all about anything you can do to help your mind and body feel better and teach that. And also a company called Experience Design International. And it's basically providing market research and customer journey experience mapping to large international companies. And then in my spare time, I wrote this book that I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it evolved and how actually the process of getting a publisher to accept your book is actually a lot like getting a business off the ground. So, you know, our time together today, I want to share my story of the journey of starting with traditional business tools and market research and to move into integrating and leading with a more magical approach, which is the genesis of the title. And what I'm going to share with you, you're not going to find in any entrepreneur book. It's probably going to be way different than what any of mentors at UConn or elsewhere will tell you. So if we roll back the clock to 2017, I was asked to fill out an author's questionnaire by a publisher called North Atlantic Books. They are a nonprofit publisher out of Berkeley, California, but they partner with Penguin Random House. So that allows that international distribution. So I'm going to share my screen and show you some of the questions that they asked me to answer. Now, in my case, I had a lot of the book done, so I was able to, I wasn't pitching an idea. I was really pitching something I'd been working on. So let me show you some, I think it was 13 pages of questions, but I just want to highlight a couple. So here they were asking me what would be some possible titles for your book. I showed a total of, 5 possible ideas. They asked me, I'm going to just kind of scroll. They wanted my credentials, and as with business, they want to know, why are you credible to do the thing you say you're going to do? What makes your idea unique? Who do you think is going to be interested in what you've created? So here, I'll just give you a little excerpt of how I describe what the book was. I said, in this never been done before book, empowerment coach and CEO Delanea Davis takes a look back at the 9th century Viking era, where women of the time sourced creativity, courage, wisdom, clarity, protection, love, and more by connecting with mythical gods and goddesses through the ancient alphabet called the runes. This how-to interactive book describes several methods for reading runes to better understand situations, relationships, and one's own self. Readers will create or buy their own set of runes and embark on a 30-day journey of self-discovery, either on their own or with the Rune circle of like-minded women. With a modern spin on each reading, this book was meant to make what was once old and mystical new and practical for today's women. So I kind of had this idea, this book's for women. It's all about women. Women are underrepresented in history, from the 9th century. And the publisher told me back then, thankfully, books for women are off trend. So are you open to us changing the title, changing, the cover? I'm like, they know better than me, sure. And of course they were right, because, times have changed. So, they asked for a longer description. I talk about that. But what I thought was fun, I haven't looked at this in 5 years until just the other day when I was preparing for this talk. I thought about, I was saying, what makes the book different? And I'm just going to scroll here. I had said there are books written by academics about the runes. There are very pagan-y, witchy books written about the runes. There's complete self-help books that have nothing to do with that. And I kind of said, this book is none of that and all of that all in one. So that's why I kind of thought of it as it's never been done before. So, partly they wanted to know who do I think would buy the book? What makes it unique? And you could see what they wrote in pink is what they wanted me to answer. And then what would be some keywords? They even wanted me to go as far as not just share the content of what the outline would be, but they wanted to know, what are other books out there that are similar to yours? Who published them? What are they selling for? So that was kind of cool. Like, it was a level of detail that I hadn't really thought about, but going through this process, I will admit, I had this, if you ever heard the term FUD, fear, uncertainties, and doubts, I had this, my first fear, and I actually wrote this down so I could be very clear with you, was if I published this book on this, ancient alphabet that did have pagan ties, it was in Northern Europe until Christianity swept through Northern Europe. And because the church, the Christian movement was so strong, the Rune alphabet was considered, it could be pagan. So it kind of went underground. So I thought, if I put this book out there and it's a little too woo-woo, am I going to hurt my professional reputation running these two companies? And also, will I be judged for it, right? My uncertainty was, will this be relatable? Like, just because I think this is super cool, like, will it connect for anybody or not? Because I'm kind of crashing together things that have never been done before. And then the doubt I had was, well, I'm not a PhD in old Nordic studies. Like, why me? Like, I do have this history of doing leadership coaching and mentoring and that kind of thing and using research, but I just thought I could just get attacked by people that are experts. So I read a ton of books. I renewed my Yukon library card and pulled out books that were published, that are out of print. And I was like, I need to know everything there is to know. And the interesting thing is, because it was the 9th century, a lot of it was an oral tradition. And the only thing that's documented that we know, it's based on a series of poems by this politician and philosopher from like the 1200s. And I was just so mystified that, why do we hear all this stuff about the Norse gods? Here's one of them. Here's my prop. This is Odin. So for those of you that watch the Marvel movies with Thor and Loki and Odin, like, there was all sorts of stuff about the guys, but why don't we hear about the women? And I felt like in history, the women's story got erased, which is why I felt really compelled to bring this back out. And, what am I feeling that their meaning and usage could be in modern days? So the good news is the publisher picked up the book, which I was very blessed, because I just happened to know someone who knew that publisher and said, if you don't sign her, someone's going to get her. And they called me the same day. So that never happens. That was like divine intervention. So it takes about a year from the time a publisher signs you on board. Even though I had a lot of it done, there's an iterative process. They have to lay it out. They come up with designs. I wish I had ready for you some original cover ideas I had. The first one that I got from this design team I worked with, it literally looked like Fabio. Like, it was so terrible, because I was, wanted to bring through the relationship aspect of it. So I was thinking, I need to make a poster of all the covers that were never meant to be born, and thank God they were not. So what they ended up doing, they changed the title and the cover. This is what they did. It says, Rune Reading Your Life, a toolkit for insight, intuition, and clarity. So I went into it saying, I want a hardcover and I want color in the book. And they're like, we don't do that. But guess what? They did. So again, just lucked out. They also came up with this idea of, I said, you can make your own runes. I'll show you an example. They were carved. They could be carved into crystal. They all have, like, there's 24 of them. Or, you can actually find sets of cards that have all the rune symbols on them. So, so I thought people can make their own, they can buy them, but the publisher had a great idea. And they said, what if we put card stock in the back of the book and people can just cut out these little baby cards? So when you're shuffling the cards and you want to pull a rune, it's right there. I'm like, that's brilliant. So I was super excited about that. Then came the day I was having a big Cloud9 barbecue here. And we were a couple months into COVID. So we had a band in the backyard. Everybody brought a cooler and lawn chairs. Everybody is sprawled out, so no one's near each other. And the book had just come out. Like, it came out, when COVID hit, the publisher said, you're supposed to be releasing the book in April, but we're going to release it in March because we don't know what's going to happen with the postal service or whatever. So it happened to be the day before this epic barbecue that I was having with the Cloud9 team and the band. I get my first bad review on Amazon. So I start to read it out loud. I mean, I should have read it to myself, but some friends were here that I trusted. And as I'm reading it out loud, I was like, wow, like if you knew me, it said crazy things. Like, I was, negative person, all this craziness. And I'm like, what? So I slept on it. When I woke up in the morning, I literally Googled the psychology of criticism, because I'm like, my intellectual little brain wants to understand. And what I actually read was they say that there's this famous quote that says a criticism is the most accurate autobiography because it says more about them than you. And I was kind of like, that really hurt, like what this person said. I mean, they mentioned they said, when I see her book, I think of her dead dog. I was like, oh, because I put an epilogue in the book and I mentioned how my dog had transitioned through all this. So anyhow, the barbecue starts. Somebody from Hartford Healthcare happened to be here because they're one of our customers that has the app. And he said, tell me something personal. What's going on? And I said, well, I got my first negative review today. And he said, you know what? He says, I got called in by an SVP at Hartford Healthcare because there was a negative patient review and they wanted to know exactly what this was about. And I said, well, that individual wanted to book a massage on a specific day at a specific time, and we didn't have a massage therapist available. And they're like, is that it? And he's like, yes, that's it. So he said to me, you could just be sitting out staring at the grass and meditating and not caring about anything other than being focusing on whatever you're doing. But instead you created something, you put it out there and you're trying to lift people up. And he's like, don't turn your flame down. Like, you're doing what you need to do and just let it roll off. So I'm really glad that he told me that, because I felt like I didn't think about that. Like, doctors are getting the crap beat out of them and they're going to work every day to save lives. And there are just some people out there that they're going to take swings at you because you're pursuing your dream and you have the courage and guts to do something that they don't. So from that moment on, I was like, I'm not going to read another negative review. I mean, maybe there's something to learn from them, but as time went on, looking at the Amazon scores, you get a 5-point rating. My rating has consistently been at 4.7. So I thought, consumers are discerning. Like, if they read a total outlier wacko, like, they'll just take it how they take it. So that upside was the reviews started coming in, they were good. And then comes the day later that year where I get an email and it's from the name Shane, but then there are all these Chinese characters. I'm like, what? So I open it up and it actually was a translator in Taiwan. And he said, hi, my name is Delanea, or my name is Shane. I'm doing the translation of your book for the sale of it in the Taiwan market. And he's like, can you please tell me, like, in our culture, I don't quite understand what you mean by this 2 sentences. Can you paraphrase it? So I was like, why would I not hear this from my publisher? Like, is this legit? But he went on to say, I've actually translated books for Deepak Chopra, Oprah and others. And I was like, holy crap. So sure enough, here's the book in Chinese. So this, like, I am tickled pink because I'm like, the book opens the opposite way, you read it, it's crazy. And I actually couldn't even get it here. I befriended him. I sent him Rune bracelets and he mailed me a copy of it. So that kind of like offset, like, someone's going to take a swing at you and you just have to go, hey, this book's not for everyone. That's kind of like was my net. And I feel like that's going to happen too in business, where not everyone's going to like the service or product you create. And you could do all the research in the world and get it right, like, almost every time, but inevitably there's going to be someone out there where what you've created doesn't connect. And you just have to learn early on, like, if you can just neutrally say, it's not for everybody, like, thanks for the feedback, right? And move on. So anyway, so let's get into the Rune. So of course, because I was trained as a researcher, everything's all about data and facts. There's no gut feel, there's no intuition. It's like data. So that had been all my formal training. But with this particular book, actually, the Runes really taught me something different, which is that, well, if we turn off the critical thinking side of our brain and we open up to the more creative side, we start to come up with solutions we might not have thought of otherwise. So like a parallel for you would be, if I'm moderating a focus group, and this is a true story, I was doing focus groups on insurance many years ago. I worked at Travelers and ran their research department. If I went into a focus group and I said to somebody, when you think of your insurance company, what do you think of? And all sorts of words like not worth it, too expensive, just nothing, just rational answers, because that's all true. But if I change the question and using something considered a projective technique, and I say, if your insurance company were a famous person, like, who would it be? You get a very interesting answer. And if I say, and if that famous person that was your insurance company walked in the room, what would they be wearing? What would they say? Now, suddenly I hear, somebody talking about Geico, and they're like, oh, they'd be wearing a cheesy polyester suit. They'd be playing 70s music. Like suddenly you're getting this whole other, not this rational, logical answer. Like they're bringing to life something deeper that they're not going to get to when you're just sticking with facts and data. So I would say working with the runes becomes the same thing. So this is a typical technique. So if I'm holding, this is just a velvet bag of the runes, and I say, what message do I need about my business today? And I pull a rune. This one actually is the rune that represents this idea of surrendering, not putting up resistance. So, in business, sometimes we say, this is exactly how I want this deal to go. It's got to close by this date. Here's how much it'll be, da, 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 da. We're trying to control. But this rune is suggesting not to throw up resistance, to surrender and flow with whatever comes your way. Don't look at anything as a setback. Sometimes what you consider a delay is actually something that's going to play out and benefit you even better. So that's an interesting way to do them, is that you can say, what message do I need today? What do I need to know about my health? And you pull the message. And the way I wrote the book was, the first third of the book talks about the Norse mythology and Loki and Odin. And here's my other prop. This is Freya. She's like the goddess of that era. And so I would say she's a lot like Venus and Aphrodite, like goddess of love, goddess of fertility. So the first third of the book talks about that and the psychology of symbols. Just think about, actually, Henry Edinger's on, and he gave me this idea to add in the book. When I was talking about the psychology of symbols, he said, well, just think about, Steve Jobs and emojis. Like if you say, hello, and you have a mean face versus hello, and you have a winky face, like that little symbol changes the meaning of hello. So I was like, that's so cool. See, he's shaking his head. He's taking credit for his good idea. So I feel like, so I was talking all about that, right? Then in the middle of the book, that's the 30-day practice, where every day you're given an assignment of what to do with the runes. At first you're pulling a daily rune, you're writing what the rune message is and how it applies to your life. Then you start to pull runes to read relationships. So if you say, where am I? Where's my significant other? What am I here to teach them? What are they here to teach me? And what's the outcome? Or you could read a situation and say, the situation is, my family, or whatever the thing is. You start pulling runes, and now we're getting out of that critical factor mode where we're like, what's wrong with this situation? And we're like, I just pulled the rune for warrior, and I just pulled the rune for protection. What do those mean to me in this situation? Now, suddenly, again, you're turning off that critical factor, and you're thinking about the situation in a more imaginative way. So in the book, I talk about it two ways. One, there's the metaphysical explanation, which is like similar to pulling a tarot card or angel cards. Like you're getting this divinely guided message at the exact moment you're meant to get it. But the more psychology-based answer is where it's associationism, right? And that's just a very common concept in psychology is, if the ink blot, I show you the ink blot, what do you see when you look at this? Like your mind is going to create meaning and apply it. So anyway, so I started using this in business, and I do that. So a lot of times the more you're able to start, tapping in and turning off the critical brain, and meditation's a foundation to this. You kind of quiet your mind and you ask a question, and the first thing that pops into your mind is the answer. Like no one knows better than you. And even though our training in school and our parents raising us, like they come from a place of protection and caution, and they don't want us to take risks. They want us to just play it safe. But there is a way for you to access this higher level of awareness. Another tool I like, has anyone ever worked with the pendulum? You see the tip of my pendulum broke off, but I love it, so I can't let it go. Anyone? Okay. So this is another way to work with your intuition, and it can apply in your personal life or business life. So when you first buy a pendulum, you're supposed to really put your energy in it for a couple of days, whether it's sleep it under your pillow. All my women friends tuck it in their bra near their heart. They just put their energy in it. But then basically, the idea is, and I'll give you the metaphysical and then the scientific. Okay. So the metaphysical. So if I say, pendulum, when you first get your pendulum, you say, pendulum, show me yes. And you wait and see what it does. Now for mine, it'll go back and forth as if you're nodding your head. And then pendulum, show me no. The no will be like this for me. Sometimes for folks, their yes, it'll be a circle. Sometimes their no, it will stand still. It's kind of like it will show you what the yes and no is if you're using it. So the obviously the metaphysical answer is that there is divine energy that's going to give you the answer. What is for your best and highest, greatest good answer? The scientific meaning or interpretation, and I learned this 10 years ago. I got certified in hypnosis. It's the ideomotor. So even though your conscious mind is not moving it at all, like your subconscious mind has an answer, and it will, you can't see it with your own fingers, but it's starting to move it on its own. Not on its own, it's you, but you're kind of, you can't detect that you're moving it, but you're actually moving it. So again, I would say pick whichever version makes sense to you, whether it's the more spiritual versus the more scientific based. But so for me, I just read this in a book today. So when your normal systems are not necessarily giving you the answers you want, this is where tools come into place. So pendulum's one. But with the runes, I would say how I use all of this in my business for sure. Sometimes I feel like when you're too close to your own situation, you don't trust your own judgment. So sometimes I'll ask, is this a person in business that I can trust? And usually I can close my eyes. If I eliminate my sense of sight, I feel like it's heightening my sixth sense for intuition. So typically I'll see a giant Y if it's a yes, a giant N if it's a no. But if I don't see that, I could ask the pendulum, or I can hold the runes. And the way I work, anybody can do this. If you ask a question and you kind of let your runes know, if the answer is yes, and I pull a symbol, it'll be symbol up. And if it's a no, it'll be upside down. So that could be a way to kind of do yes, no. What else? Yeah, then also, I've even done it on proposals where I'll kind of try to test price elasticity, like how much will this person pay for this contract? And I'll write different price points, and I'll just like have the pendulum hang over it, and it'll stop me like when you can't go any higher. So I play with it, and it is yet to give me a wrong answer. So I mean, if you go by the law of statistics and odds, like what are the odds in the last, I don't know, I started studying these 8 years ago. It's never been wrong. It's never actually happened where someone has asked me to read runes and I give a reading, I read what they say, and they're like, oh my God, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm just telling you what these symbols mean and how the story works together, which is so the researcher in me is like, how is this even possible? But again, if you turn on that science brain, the science brain would say, you're telling them what the meaning is, but they're applying it to the situation, and it's creating a information that's useful to them, that's helping to alleviate uncertainty and make them feel better. Henry has a question. He's asking, have you had a scenario where they went against you and it hurt you? I have, actually. And I know Henry even knows the story. Well, the story had to do with someone had years before I was running my first business, but someone I knew asked if I wanted to be an investor in the business. And it was a purpose-based business that had to do with hydroponic growing of vegetables. And I, in my heart of hearts, thought, like, because of all the bad stuff in our food, it's causing cancer. This work that this individual is doing is, I know, going to reduce the incidence of cancer. Like if you look at how healthy people are in, let's say, Holland, where everything's grown fresh and local, and it's not all the stuff we have in our food. Like, I just believed in it. And so I did not ask my runes or pendulum or anything. I just got worn down and I was convinced, and my heartstrings were tugged. So I went along with it. Well, then when he came back and wanted more money, I asked, and I actually saw this giant red X. And I was like, I don't know. I even told Henry, I see a giant red X. I'm like, but it's not an end for no. Like, that was my rationalization. And skip to the end. And this is actually in the book. I was in Rhode Island helping out with this business beside the investment. And I'm walking on the beach one morning, and I find a rune that actually had the natural symbol that represents disruption. And this, I'll show you the symbol. Basically, the disruption means there's unexpected change coming. See, it looks almost like the letter H, because it actually does represent the letter H. If anybody follows tarot, it's like the Tower card, which makes people nervous because it says something you're not expecting is coming. But the good thing is, like, the more disruptive and the more it shakes up your life, the greater chance for something new and better to emerge. So the idea is like, think about if there's a volcano and everything burns to the ground. Now you have complete fertile ground for something new to grow. So that was peculiar to me. I'm like, weird. I keep getting the disruption symbol. I wonder why. So I took a picture, put it on Facebook that morning and said, very interesting. I keep seeing the rune for disruption. I'm wondering what's the unexpected change to come. And then within 2 hours, the CEO of that company becomes barreling in the coffee house where I'm working. And he's like, we need to get in the car right now. And I'm like, he's like, get your things. And he's frantic. And I'm like, what? He's like, we have to go to Providence, Rhode Island right now. There's a warrant for my arrest from the FBI. And I was like, what? So anyhow, he was involved in things that he shouldn't have been in. I'll kind of just say that. And he ended up getting arrested. He spent a year in prison after a year under house arrest. And the weird thing is, when I went back to just my notes and journaling, I would say probably 9 months before that happened, I was just studying the runes. So I literally had pulled 3 runes for him and I sent him this kind of reading. And it actually talked about how he on the inside knows he's doing things he's not supposed to do, but he has so much ego and he's getting signals. He's getting these intuitive, you need to make a change, but his ego is overriding it. And he thought he could outrun it. And I had no idea what it was. And I was telling him, I'm like, I don't know what this means, but I kept getting this whole, he has this false sense of he's ahead of the game. He can control everything. He's untouchable, but ego. So I was like, I don't think that about you. I think you're going to cure, you're going to reduce the incidence of cancer. You're going to get a Nobel Prize. But every time I'd pull for him after that, he'd get these same runes kept coming up over and over again. So when all this went down, I remember he told me that on Easter, he was at church and his whole plan was because his mom died from cancer. That was why he was passionate to do this. He said he was at church on Easter Sunday and he saw what felt like his mom's ghost and she was shaking her head at him. And I was like, why? You're doing such great things. What do you mean? And he's just like, because she feels like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, what could that possibly, there's nothing more you could do, not knowing that he was doing things he shouldn't have done. So Henry, that's my story, probably my biggest story of not only a lot of money lost, because of course the company went bankrupt, but also there was kind of some betrayal there for me too, because, I trusted him with money, with time. And then he did things he shouldn't have. So, and I never really say what in the books, it doesn't matter. It was more about once you start to see these symbols, you're going to start to notice them everywhere. I'm going to pause for a second to say, are there any questions? Have I described clearly enough what they are? I mean, I'm so close to them, drinking my own Kool-Aid over here.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job. This is a super interesting topic, and feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question, or if you feel more comfortable, you can definitely ask it in the chat. Either one works.
So one thing I want to share, just wave at me if you want to talk and I'll stop talking. But one thing I want to share is, remember I mentioned my FUD and I felt like I don't want to damage my credibility. So I purposely wrote the book right down the middle. It's not going to be pagany and witchy. It's not, I just want to appeal to people that are on this call, for example. And what the publisher had me do from day one was create an author profile on Amazon so that people can learn about you and people want to follow you. So over time, there's algorithms behind Amazon, people like you bought this, also bought that. So they started to show me who else, for people that bought my book, what other authors were they reading? And I wanted to show you this because it surprised me. All right, here we go. So this was an example, I could see my author page and it says customers, let me get this out of the way, also bought items by. So you click on this guy, Josh Simmons. I started following all the people that, these folks. So he's an intuitive medium, he's basically a witch. He's up in New Hampshire and, he wrote a book on runes, but he wrote other things. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But this particular person is my favorite. He's called the Glam Witch. So this individual, he lives in Chicago. He sells life insurance during the day, And then at night, he like rocks these outrageous outfits and great nails and lipstick. And he does readings. He does tarot readings at some, establishment. But I was like, hold on, here I am trying to stay like in what do they call it, stay hidden in the broom closet. And like, no. So even though I tried to play it safe, like I was attracting people that have an interest in metaphysics and tarot and all that stuff. So this individual, this person intrigued me. This author, Lisa Chamberlain, she was self-published for years, and she's actually the best-selling author on this book, Runes for Beginners. But you see all her other books, and it turns out no one knows who she really is. This is kind of like her stage name, quote unquote, because I read her family doesn't know she's in the broom closet. So I guess in the last year or two, a publisher did approach her. They were able to contact her and basically signed her. But all this time, some people think if you don't have a publisher, how is your stuff going to get marketed? You're not going to sell. She's an example of she's super, super successful, self-published, where you keep all the profit, versus if you go with a publisher, they start you at 10% of your book sale. And then after you sell over 5,000 copies, they move you up a little bit. So anyway, so I thought that was cool. So I had this idea of who I thought would buy my book. And it was really all these people interested in things like tarot and Wicca and all the things I didn't want people to think about me. And it turns out, you can have who you think is your audience, but your readers are going to find you, or your customers, whatever your business is. And then I also wanted to show you guys this. So these are some more of this is my website. It's called Rune Reading, where you can see the symbols and you can click on any one of them and read. This is an excerpt from the book. So it tells you what's the Proto-Germanic word from the 9th century, or sorry, this is the Proto-Germanic, but what's the one word explanation? So this is a great one if you're trying to manifest prosperity and money, which I will show you. It's my screensaver on my phone. Why not? And then I kind of like had a designer. I created this idea of if you were to have a rune stance and hold your body in that, almost like if you're doing flow yoga, what would that look like? And then I also, having an app company, we built an app also that allows you to pull digital runes. Like, so you can click on a message for me, the runes will all spin around and it will show you a rune and it will give you a way to read them. So I thought that was another thing. Like, I want the hard old school book, but if people don't want to walk around with a bag of crystals like I had for years, you can also like pull a rune in your pocket. So I think it's great when a situation that you're not expecting comes up and you feel like, I just want insight or clarity, like what is the meaning of this? Pulling a rune, reading the meaning, and then taking a step back and go, oh, okay. Suddenly you flip the lens from rational brain, what's the answer, data, to interesting. I'm seeing it in a way I hadn't thought about. So now I'm going to really pause and wait for a question. What can I answer? Had anyone ever heard of the runes before? Let me ask that. No. Okay. Well, a lot of times the insight and guidance that you'll get from a tool, like a different type of tool, interestingly, like when it feels like it's counter to what business principles are, I will tell you that, and Henry knows this because we're partners with Experience Design International, co-founders for that one. We literally, when Henry had first left corporate, he said, oh my gosh, DMV wants us to do a customer experience project. And I thought, well, we can't put it under the first business because we're talking about Reiki and hypnosis and meditation, and that would be a publicity nightmare for the state of Connecticut. So we need to create another company. So we stood something up, but I remember saying, okay, should there be a symbol like in the logo, like, beyond just the name? And I closed my eyes and I'm like, weird. I see the symbol. This is the symbol that represents fertility. And I'm like, I'm going to go back to my runes and say, symbol, rune up, if it's yes, rune face down if it's no. Should there be a symbol in our logo? I pull the rune and it's this rune again. I'm like, okay, well, this rune, represents fertile ground, like where there's a new beginning, anything you touch is going to turn into what you want it to turn into. And so we took it a step further. And when Henry and I were talking about what do we call it, we wanted experience design because this was about customer experience, whatever. And he said, well, I want to travel internationally and not pay for it. So let's put the word international in there. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So, so we did. And then, you know, our first year in business with no marketing at all, we did not quite $500,000 in business, but it just came. So I feel like there's just so, I mean, I've just got story after story after story where not only can the runes give you a message and help you see things differently, but also they can attract things that you want. So another really famous one in just that, you know, you're going to start to notice them. There's actually, they show up in a lot of places. Like, has anybody seen the logo for the Ragnar relay? So it's basically two of these back to back. Like that's, you know, if you imagine a mirror image. But this is a really famous one that represents warrior. So at the time, Vikings would carve this symbol into like their swords and their chest plates. But then it's typically paired with one for protection, which I'm trying to find. I don't see it. It looks like, you know, if you look at a peace sign, right, it almost looks like an upside down Y with the stick in the middle. If you flipped it around, the rune for protection looks like that. So actually, I think I'm wearing it. No, I'm wearing warrior. So anyway, the other thing is it becomes kind of like a visual reminder of like, if you pull a rune and you're wearing it, you say, what do I have to think about today? And you pull strength. And the message for strength is all around, look at the miles behind you. Like we often underestimate all the things we've been through. And, you know, we waver in what we think what we can accomplish when really we're stronger than when we think we are. So they're always like very, I think, inspirational. And some other things I've done with them. I did create kind of these goddessy. So there's Freya the goddess. I created these, you know, kind of inspirational cards where there's a rune with the positive message. So if you don't want to pull a rune, you can pull an inspiration card and say, so actually I'm going to pull a card right now to say, what message does this group need today? All right. Like, what's your runic message? And the message is, oh, actually funny. Remember I showed you guys this one and I talked about here, I called it defense, but this idea of surrendering. So the message says, sometimes the best action is inaction. When I'm unsure of what to do, I'm at ease waiting and doing nothing until I know the time is right. So they say like the best defense is no defense, being totally open to however it unfolds, it's going to be fine versus I want it to go my way, you know? So this is an idea of, so as your day unfolds, if something unexpected happens or it's not going the way you want, having this mindset that like, oh, I'm going to allow a gentle unfolding and know that however it ends up is exactly where it's meant to end up.
That's awesome. I love that. That was a perfect rune for this group and for all entrepreneurs especially. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, and I will also be putting a recording of this up on the CCEI website. So if you do want to watch it, you can feel free. You can also reach out to me and I can connect you with Delanea if you have any questions that you come up with later on, or you want to connect with her on LinkedIn. And I want to say thank you so much for coming today and taking time to be with all of us. It was super interesting, and I look forward to hearing more.
Thanks. And you read my mind. I was going to say I'm a LinkedIn person. So send a note, send a connection. I'm happy to be a resource in any way.
Awesome.
So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Bye.
We're not on this one next, right? We're on somebody else. Okay.
Okay, see you there in a second.